Make sure you make time for my tour and interview at Proven Winners with Marshall Dirks. Hello garden friends, and welcome to my channel, DK's Garden Oasis. For those that don't know me, my name is Debbie. I garden in Zone 5B, inspiring you to bloom, grow, and conserve in your garden. Make sure you stay to the end where I share a beautiful garden quote from an unknown author. So today's going to be a very exciting day. I am going to be driving to the Proven Winners Administrative Office, and I am meeting Marshall Dirks, the Vice President of Marketing at Proven Winners. It doesn't actually house the actual plants. They do have seeds there, and your augers, aquapots, your fertilizer, those kind of hardscapes. I have been purchasing Proven Winners plants since 2017, and I stand behind their products. We're going to find out from Marshall why the Proven Winners plants are so special and where you can purchase plants, whether it be in your garden centers, retailers, or online. So enjoy my visit to Proven Winners and my interview with Marshall Dirks. Hello garden friends, and welcome to my channel, DK's Garden Oasis. I am Debbie, and I have the pleasure of introducing Marshall Dirks, the Vice President of Marketing at Proven Winners. Marshall, thank you for having me and taking time out of your busy schedule to talk to us today. Marshall went to Northern Illinois University in DeKalb, Illinois, which is where this facility is. And he worked various jobs throughout his career and credits a gentleman by the name of Steve Blacksmith as a mentor to you. And what kind of leadership skills did he have that feel like brought you some great leadership skills to Proven Winners?
Well, to start, I probably didn't have any leadership skills, but what I had was a lot of passion. As I got involved in the plant industry, Steve Blacksmith was working at Ball Horticultural Company, world-renowned company in West Chicago. Amazing start to my career in horticulture. And having been someone who hadn't had any horticulture or agricultural education or any marketing experience, Steve really showed me the passion for plants and taking care of vendors, and just his commitment to quality and consistency, and just recognizing that the industry is just filled with people who are passionate and friendly, and there's very few bad apples. So treat everybody with tons of great care. And there were just good things. It was my heartbeat. It was what I was looking for, and he just encouraged that. I think that's probably what the owners of Proven Winners found as well. With me being involved with no horticulture or marketing, they asked me to be their marketing director. And so I think it just stemmed from that desire to care for people with great products and give them the best information possible. Whether the product is good or bad, you still tell people the truth about the products, and that's played extremely well. And it's also pushed us to develop products that we can always stand behind and to push. And so Ball and Steve were instrumental in just setting that groundwork as a foundation for me over 25 years ago, entering, because I was only 12 years old then, right? So now I put a few gray hairs on, but at the beginning of my career, I just looked like a little kid. But having the ability to be with great companies has definitely helped me for sure.
That kind of brought me to my next question. What attributes did Proven Winners have that kind of brought you to this role, even though you said you had no marketing experience, and you're here over 20 years? So that's the kind of things that you're talking about, a great company.
Yeah, it was a risk. I mean, I had asked to work at home. I had a family, a young family. I was commuting 45 minutes, and my wife was going the other way. And we knew we wanted to raise our own kids. We didn't want to pay other people to raise our own kids. They were our kids. We wanted to raise them. And so that meant working from home. And 25 years ago, nobody was doing that.
No.
And Proven Winners was open to that model. And that's really what created the interest for me to be able to do that and work from our basement and doing that. And then as we added staff, we got offices and so forth. But really, I think, at the end of the day, before Proven Winners really got started, everybody, if you'd ask gardeners, majority of them were failing with plants, and they thought that they were blaming themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And Proven Winners had a different model of, instead of a breeder introducing a product directly, they were asking breeders to send them all their best plants and said, hey, we'll market those and we're going to test them and trial them. A lot of the trialing and the testing was done in Europe or wherever the breeder was, and not necessarily where a North American gardener was. And so that's where Proven Winners and their group really put all the trialing. And then they did things like virus indexing. They want, just as we've all learned how if we get COVID, we're going to be tireder, we're going to be lethargic, we're going to have symptoms, we may or may not spread those around, and plants have the same things. And they get diseases and so forth. And this was the first group that really virus indexed everything and said, hey, we're not going to send any plants that have viruses. These were plants that weren't going to be produced from seed, they were going to be from cuttings, which was fairly new at that time. So the spread of disease and viruses was essential to keep clean, and these guys were committed to that. And so that really led to this notion that a better garden starts with a better plant. And when we started first talking about that, people were like, what do you mean a better plant? Aren't all petunias the same? Mm-hmm. Well, they aren't. And you've probably experienced that. Super petunias are different than super bells are different than million bells and on and on. But really, that was 25 years ago. That was like shocking to master gardeners, you know. And what they were testing for was color differences and things, but vigor and, I mean, don't all petunias grow the same way? No. And so what ended up happening is you had people who were having poor experiences with gardening, and it wasn't because they were doing anything wrong. It was those genetics weren't suited for their environment. They were from South Africa, or they were from Europe or Holland, where the conditions weren't the same. And by us testing those products across the nation, we could really go out and say, this is a better plant. Unlike when your car breaks down, you swear to the mechanic that you've never sped, you've never thrown on the brakes hard, you've never done anything wrong, or your computer breaks or your phone breaks, and you didn't drop it in the toilet. No, never got wet, never sat out in the rain, never put it in the garden and it got wet. And so in all those other products, we blame the technology or the product. In gardening, gardeners blame themselves.
Absolutely.
And we really felt that that's a shame. The gardener wasn't at fault many of the times. Now, we've all killed plants. But Proven Winners, we want to kill more plants than you.
To see the best plant.
Exactly, to get the best plant. And so that's what really I saw with this group, and I could latch onto that because I wasn't a passionate gardener. And I wanted plants, and my generation, and my kids, and everybody, they wanted plants that they weren't familiar with, you know, and Proven Winners is introducing a whole bunch of genuses. You know, no one had heard of Calibrachoa, Brachyantha, Scovola. No one had heard of those until Proven Winners put them on the map. Diamond Frost is euphorbia. Most people thought of euphorbia as a plant that you got a rash from and you didn't want to grow it. Passionate gardeners, no, I don't want a euphorbia. Oh, that's a perennial that gets everywhere. No, this is an annual Diamond Frost that grows in containers and you will be astounded with it. And so those are things that by their trialing and testing really changed the marketplace and really put the insistence on caring about the consumer in a way that no one else had really done. And that was my heartbeat as well.
Can you briefly talk about the steps it takes for a Proven Winners plant to get to gardeners and the public?
Briefly.
Briefly.
We do entire seminars on this topic. This is one of the most requested subjects that we talk about. But in a nutshell, Proven Winners requests our genetics from breeders around the world. and we get what's called first right of refusal. So it goes through our trialing process. If we deem it a proven winners plant, nobody else can introduce it. It's our plant. Now, if we reject it, then someone else may also be trialing it, but they could introduce it. But it didn't meet proven winners criteria. And that's not necessarily saying the plant was bad. Proven winners has certain criteria. We have a gentleman, Kevin Hurd, who runs what we call our genetic roadmap. So for every species of plant, we have a genetic roadmap of where we want that species to be. And every one of them is different. And so one of my good friends, a breeder who brought on Vista Bubblegum, which is a gardener's favorite,
Yes.
he told me, I said, what's the trick to breeding? He said, Marshall, breeding starts between the temples. And I'm like, what do you mean? And his name was Ushio Sakazaki. And I said, what do you mean by that? And he said, with breeding, you're always, combining pollens and, trying to get different seedlings and everything. And you get a lot of things that you're not expecting. And if you're like me, I'm like a rabbit squirrel who's like chases nuts everywhere. With a breeder, you have to be very focused because you're going to come up with lots of things that you're not expecting. And if you don't have the end goal in mind and having a vision between your temples of what you want that plant to be, then you're going to be distracted very easily.
Okay.
And so he wanted to stay very, very targeted. So whether it's a habit of a plant, whether it's disease resistance, whether it's sterile or fruit producing, whatever the characteristic those breeders are looking for, it's got to fit that genetic roadmap that Kevin and his team has set up. And here's the criteria, because other people are breeding for other things. Mm-hmm. We're breeding for certain things as well, and our breeders are doing that. And so it starts with having a vision for what we want to solve or accomplish with that plant. So it starts there. Then it goes into the trialing mode. And it's, once the breeders have given their very best plants, they're handing over their children to us. And they have a decision. They can go right to the marketplace and introduce that plant. But when they bring it to proven winners, they're delaying their gratification and their royalty payments for numbers of years. On the annual, it could be 2 or 3 or 4 years that we're trialing that, because they don't know what we have available to us. It might be the best that breeder has available, but we have a lot of other breeders who are bringing us as good or better product as well. So they're delaying that to allow us to trial that product. So it's a risk for them, but the reward is great when it becomes a proven winners plant.
Right.
And so on an annual, it might be 2 to 3 or 4 years. On a perennial, it could be 7 to 10 years. On a shrub, it could be 10 to 15 years. So depending on the type of plant it is, the trial could be longer. For an annual, for instance, we trial it in multiple places around the country, but we have a particular place in Florida that I sort of call, hell. It's 7 miles of hot trials. Either we were in Gainesville, now we're in Homestead, Florida, of trialing this product, and it's on, plastic, it's hot, it's, we want the plants to die.
You're trying to kill it.
Yeah, and the things that survive, that gives us a clue of maybe what the genetic makeup of that plant and why it might be different. And so those plants go in, and then it's not just surviving those trials, it then has to also survive production. So where in the world are we going to produce that plant? For cuttings, whether it's in Costa Rica or Guatemala or whatever, because you can't heat greenhouses in January and February for the Midwest. You've got to produce cuttings offshore. And so it's got to make transportation. It's got to be in an airplane for certain. It's got to go through customs, whatever, the USDA. It's got to hit all those things. Then it has to go to our propagators who have to plant that, so it has to root out properly. Then it has to go to a grower, it has to grow for them, and then it has to look good for a retailer. Then ultimately it has to perform for the consumer. So that we're trialing along that whole process and doing shipments, and that's why it takes so long. So we might love the plant initially in trials, but if it doesn't make it through all of those steps, then it doesn't go out there. And then the last item is it goes to 20 or 30 universities, and that they get those products a year before they're introduced to the consumer. So we're talking in 23 right now,
Right.
But the universities have seen our 24 varieties, and a number of our growers have already seen them. They're trialing those products out, but we're already working on 25, 26, 27, 28. and longer for longer term crops as well. So yeah, and that's one of the things that people don't recognize, that there are individuals behind every one of these plants. There is a person behind every one of these plants. We know the breeder. We've got small time breeders who are, a dentist or a plant lover or somebody else, or you have national companies who are bringing genetics to us. And so we have the full gamut, but the thing to keep in mind is with the proven winners, it's illegal to propagate. You can't take cuttings and start your own.
Right.
And that's no different than you can't take a Picasso painting and just start selling it as Debbie's Picasso painting and you put it on a copy machine.
Right.
Each of these breeders, Proven Winners doesn't own our plants. We're leasing those from a breeder who's allowing us the ability to sell that plant in a marketplace. So we're really responsible for protecting that plant, making sure it's clean, making sure it's the same plant every single time a consumer gets it. And then we pay them every time a plant is sold. So every time the breeder that brings us a plant, they get paid when we make a sale on those plants. And so a portion of every sale goes to those breeders, and that allows Proven Winners. We're not like Coca-Cola, who develops all their own stuff in-house and then are secretive about everything. Proven Winners has with hundreds of breeders that bring us the very, very best, and then we want to make sure those breeders are compensated for that.
What annual, perennial, and shrub would you say is a great beginner plant that is like tried and true for growers? I would say mainly in the U.S.
Sure. Well, I'm going to say a supertunia.
Well, yeah, I knew that was coming.
And I would say bubblegum, but we've got another one called jazzberry.
Oh, I've seen that one too. I think that's going in my garden next year.
Yeah, and so jazzberry is actually the annual plant of the year for 2024. And so that is a plant that we ask growers, and we say, what should be those plants and our consumers and so forth. So jazzberry is super easy. It's a vigorous supertunia. One of the things that's unique about the Vista series of supertunias is the Vistas tend to require less water and less fertilizer needs. Now, we're not going to tell you don't feed them or don't water them, but they can handle more stress in my experience in baskets and in the ground. So that's why you see a lot of people having success with the Supertunia Vistas in hanging baskets in municipals and in large containers, because they just seem to require less nutrients and less feed. Now, if you feed them more, you're going to have tighter internodes, more flowers, and more growth and things like that. But they can handle the abuse, and so that's why I think they're great plants for young or novice gardeners, or someone who, frankly, doesn't want to spend all their time doing that, and they don't want a deadhead, and we call them bury their dead. Yeah. So we want the flowers and the plant to keep producing flowers, and most plants that are trying to produce a flower, it's the end of the life cycle, right? The next process is producing a seed. So most of our plants are sterile. Not all, but many of our plants are sterile. Still, hummingbirds, butterflies, they still produce nectar, and so it's still a food source. But it may not produce an offspring, but what you'll get is 10 or 20 times more flowers. And so then you're drawing that many more pollinators in, but you won't be having the same petunias as your neighbors, and you're not bothering other people with plants that you love because they are sterile, but it allows that plant to keep growing over itself, and so then you don't have to deadhead because you don't see any of the dead flowers. So I would say Supertunia Jazzberry for this coming year.
Okay.
For a perennial, I would say Cat's Meow Nepeta. It's an easy plant, dry, hot, cold, whatever, great for pollinators, fragrant, low growing. One of the issues with a lot of Nepetas is as they grow out, and if you don't trim them, they will break open and they'll leave sort of a spot where it looks like a goose may have made a nest in there.
I have one.
Yeah, and so that was one of the habits that we didn't find attractive with Nepetas. And so this is an early blooming variety and just fills in, super nice, super hardy, easy to grow, fast grower. Always in color. If you do trim it, you can get blooms 3 or 4 times a year. It's just fantastic. Not necessary to trim it, but that's a great one. In terms of a shrub, I've got to go with the hydrangeas. Hydrangeas are super popular, but I would say for a novice grower who doesn't want to worry about old wood, new wood, changing colors, all that, go with a panicle or paniculata type of hydrangea. You'll have winter interest with that. You'll have structure in the garden for fall and in the winter. You don't have to remember where you planted it because it's always there, whereas a macrophylla, it's down in the ground and maybe you step on it or place a fountain on top of it or whatever.
Right.
And you don't have to worry about color changes. And the work that they're doing in the sizing of paniculata type hydrangeas or panicles has just been incredible. They used to be, 15 feet tall.
Yeah.
And now you can get a Limelight Prime that's 3.5, 5 feet tall, depending on your zone. And then they even have ones like Bobo and others that are, 2 or 3 feet tall that put out, so many blooms, or pufferfish. And so there's just so many different options. And I remember going through trials and people were saying, we don't need another white hydrangea. We don't need another. And I'm like, you guys are going to be shocked with what comes out in the marketplace, because now you got pinks, you got reds, you've got deep colors, and you've got greens, mauveette, and all sorts of various things. But those are the 3 plants that are just kick butt.
I agree.
So.
I agree. So what would you mentioned the National Plant of the Year, and what color would you say is the color of the year? I know it changes every year or so.
Yeah, so earlier I mentioned, I don't have a marketing degree, and I am not the standard customer. So asking consumers and asking gardeners what their preferences has been huge, and is what led to a lot of the decisions we make at Proven Winners. Is we're constantly surveying our customers. And so this year, like 78,000 people have responded to our survey. So over 20 some years, it's been like 1.2 million people have responded. And one of the questions we ask is, what is your favorite flower color? And with the exception of just 2 times, the favorite flower color has always been purple, with pink as being number 2, and then bicolors is now something that's super popular. Only during 2 times was pink and purple not the number 1 colors, and that was during the recession in 2008 and during COVID. And the number 1 flower color was blue. And people are wanting some peace in a world of calamity. Blue is a soothing color, and so you saw hotels change from Hilton red to Hilton blue. Hampton Inns changed. Lots of all the banks, they changed to blue. So we saw that, and we saw that in the flower color. Now, that doesn't allow us to talk to breeders. Hey, change the color from purple. I need a blue petunia.
Right.
But we certainly saw that with hydrangea sales.
Yes.
A lot more blues, because blues are hard to get in other plant categories. One of our Blew My Mind Evolvius was huge seller during those times as well. So what we do see is, even though pink and purples are your top colors, is we see brighter or more subdued. And so during times of prosperity, or people are feeling great and not worried about the economy or wars or things, people tend to go with bolder colors. During times where we've got Ukraine and Israel and lots of calamity, we've got elections coming up and things.
Yeah.
And so I would suspect that people are going to want more of those subdued colors, those lighter shades, those I can't think of the word,
Like maybe calming, or a little bit of serenity.
Yeah, and we definitely see that as people make those color choices. You can see it in what colors they paint their front doors or their cabinets, and you see a lot of grays on outsides of houses, and they're lighter, cooler grays versus bold, dark grays. And so it's going to be purple and pink again. Most likely, barring any calamities, any more calamities. But that's something that we have noticed. It's hard for breeders to necessarily take advantage of it, but growers certainly, when they're thinking about ends of the season, or the season gets longer, instead of buying a bunch of red plants, buy a bunch of purples and pinks, because you'll probably be more have better chance of selling those than maybe a red petunia or a red geranium or something like that. And so those are little pieces of information we give to our growers and retailers as we produce plants that customers are going to prefer. So.
Right. Proven Winners is at the forefront of new and innovative products, and we have some on here. So we'll talk about a few of these. We have our WaterWise system, and I have this at home. I use this at my front entrance for all of my pots. It works great. It has everything in it. So if you're like a little bit nervous how to, put a drip system in, this is a great product.
Yeah, I'll talk a little bit about some of the drip irrigation can be a scary word for a lot of people.
Right.
And with water restrictions in many areas and just using water more efficiently, it's just a responsible thing to do. And so each of the products here that we'll talk about whether it's energy use or water savings or nutrition or whatever. Those are all things that are important to proven winners as well. And water use is a key one. And so when we developed the WaterWise system, it was primarily is how do we simplify buying a drip irrigation system? Because if you go to a store,
Home Depot
or Lowe's or whatever, they have all the parts, but they're in the plumbing department. They're not in the gardening department.
No.
And then you got to figure out everything. And so what we did is not only did we develop products within the kits that are better, such as our tubing is a rubber tube versus a vinyl tube or one that will crack. So you can leave ours all out all winter. You don't have to push all the water out. You can bend it around corners. You can tie it into knots and it will not crack or kink. So that's huge for someone who's going around a garage or a window or a brick or whatever the case may be. We also, the drippers are also designed that it prevents bugs from coming in. So we've all, at the end of, if you live in the north, you've turned on your gas grill and all the burners don't go on, right? Mm-hmm. Well, that's because spiders have laid nests and eggs in the orifices. And so until you get those blown out with the gas, the propane that you're pushing through, or you scrape it or tap it or whatever. And the same thing can happen with an irrigation system is little bugs and critters can go in. So our drippers are actually designed to be anti-bug. So they don't crawl into there and lay their nest, because the worst thing is you put a drip system and all the drippers don't work. Mm-hmm. And then you don't know why, and you're cutting off drippers and so forth. And so that's another key benefit of doing that. And so we put them all in a single kit that you can do 10 containers, 1 dripper per. And then we do recommend putting a timer. And so we do sell some people's timers, 1 zone or 2 zone. Depending on how you set up your system. I usually do in the springtime, my plants are immature. The root system, isn't fully mature yet. So in the springtime, I might do 15 minutes at 6 a.m. But in the summertime, I do 15 minutes, 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. So I double that watering as that plant matures and as the temperatures rise. So you can use more water that way. And so people who run it for hours don't need to do that. If you got a lot of water coming out the bottom, you don't want to create that water channel where all that water will drip out. You want that water to stay in the container. And so just change your timing as needed. But I would definitely recommend a timer.
Yes, I definitely.
Makes it simpler.
Yes, so. I have a double too, so that it could attach to your regular faucets if you need to use something, but definitely get it.
And besides having the kits, if you need extra drippers or teas or whatever, we sell all those individually as well. And so we're more than happy to help people. We love it. It's really been a game changer. And if you ever go away on vacation, how many of us really trust our neighbors to water our plants?
Yeah, or
because we know that the first thing you do is you get home from a trip, you don't go inside. You go and check out your garden, right? And so you want to make sure your babies are alive, and this is a cheap insurance policy for that.
It's wonderful, wonderful product. And then we have your twist and plant augers.
Yeah.
So I use these, right now I use them all year round. I use them in the springtime for my annuals, and I also use them for my bulbs. Right now your daffodils and tulips. And they're heavy duty. You put them on an 18-volt drill. And that's the brand my husband has, the DeWalt.
Yeah.
And they have different sizes if you want to talk about that. I have the smallest one because right now I just nail and use them, but I would like a larger one at some point.
Yeah, so we'll just grab a couple of these and I'll talk about a couple of the things. Some of the nice things about these is a lot of your traditional bulb diggers that you can find at a box store or whatever, their rod here is about the size of this. So it's the exact same size as the place that the drill is holding on to. Where you can see this is double the size, so it's very substantial. So you cannot bend this. If you bend this, we will give you a new one. We also have a hex, because oftentimes people can't tighten their drill tight enough, or they don't use their key in the chuck to tighten it up.
Right.
You know, a lot of the electric drills, they don't have it, and most people don't put their item on properly and allow the drill to sync that up. So they're using their hand strength, which oftentimes may not be enough. And so having a hex allows that from not spinning within that mechanism. And all the other ones, they're all round. So they spin, and then you see the drill go around or the auger not move because it's stuck in the ground. This is also welded all the way through, so the flighting won't come off because, you know, your digging end is right here, and this is just raising all the soil up. And so the other nice thing I like about the white is, how many of us garden and we pick up our tools in the evening? You can't see a blind, you can't see a black one, and you step on it, you trip. Where did I do it? Well, white.
Yeah.
You can find. So this is the taller one. So I, like you, I actually prefer the shorter one because I'm on my hands and knees a lot, and and I tend to be digging the hole and planting at the same time on my hands and knees. Now, if you're gardening with somebody else, this is great because you can be doing the holes and someone else can be coming along and plant with you. What I do use this for is I use this to break up my mulch every season. So a lot of times your mulch will create a surface that will, if you pour water on it, it just rolls right off. You know, as it's summer, it heats up and then really forms a barrier, which is great for the weeds, but it doesn't look very good over time, and you want it to have more aeration. You want that water to go into your plants versus running off to the edge of your yard or whatever. And so what I do is I run this sideways and just run it across the top of my mulch, and it just breaks that up. I do it with mushroom compost that I do for all my raised beds. I put mushroom compost and I want to work it in that top bit of soil. And so this is a great tool for that. And so that's what I recommend for this.
Yes, I'm going to have to get me one of those.
There you go. And then the larger one back here, you know, this is fantastic for planting 1-gallon shrubs and perennials. Definitely when you're using these, I do recommend to have that side handle. Most people don't set their... One of the things on your drill is never put it in the drill mode. If you put it in the drill mode, it will constantly change. It will constantly run. Whereas all the other modes, where it will say 3 or 5 or 7 or whatever, that has an electric brake and it will stop that drill from actually moving. So always set your drill on the very lowest level. Not just the low, medium, and high settings, but actually the setting on the chuck, it will have a bunch of numbers. Put it on the lowest one, and if it doesn't move, move it up to 3. If it doesn't move, move it up to 5 or 7. But get it to a comfortable spot, because if you put it on the constant drill or a higher number, you're going to break a wrist or hurt yourself. Right. And so that's where that secondary handle really helps. But definitely lower that number to your comfortable. And you may find different areas of your yard might have more clay or more sand, whatever the case may be. So just because somebody uses theirs at 11 doesn't mean that will work for you. So let your soil really dictate what number you set. Always start low. You can always raise the number, and it'll save you a lot of pain. And then that second handle is definitely recommended. And then obviously for the larger drill, you know, an auger, it's great, but a lot of municipals, they're not allowing 2-stroke engines anymore. And so that's what the development of our larger auger system, that if you're doing 20 holes or fence posts or whatever, those augers really help. And so I say, you know, a shovel and a spade, oh, that's so 1980s.
Yeah.
You know, this is the 21st century right here. So.
Well, when I showed my husband this, he loves it.
He starts gardening with you.
He is helping now.
Yeah.
He is definitely helping. He's like, oh, this is much easier than digging a hole.
Yeah. The other benefit of using augers is oftentimes when you dig, so in the Midwest, we have a lot of clay soil.
Yes.
So I tend to have these clumps that look exactly like my spade, right? You know, they're all, you know, flat-sided, there's chunks and everything, and then I try to jam them in the hole, and then I'm dicing them all up to make it all, you know, nice and fine. But an auger will churn all that up. So when you go to plant, you know, and all of us are digging holes twice the size of what we should be planting, right? You're not just conforming it. You know, if your plant is this size, if you jam it right in the same size hole, that's really detrimental to the plant. And then at the end of the year, you wonder, hey, I just pulled that out of the ground and my roots didn't go anywhere. It's because you made the hard sides of that hole in the ground very difficult for the roots to go in. So an auger breaks all that up. But now you have all that loose soil, and so your water can hold more moisture than just these big clumps. And so that's another benefit that I didn't realize of using an auger until I was like, wow, now I have finely ground pulverized soil, if you will. And it just, for the health of the plant, is much better.
And then we have your fertilizers,
Yeah.
your plant food. And you want to talk about a little bit about that? I have
Sure.
both of these products.
Yeah, so again, when we develop products, we want a better product. So we want better steel, better molding, whatever the case may be, better water-wise. And the same thing is with our plant foods. And we recognize most of the plant foods that were out there either required a second ingredient or second application of something, or they were more concerned about immediate gratification. So you think about bloom boosters or Miracle-Gro products are high in nitrogen because they know that you want blooms.
Right.
What Privet Winters is more concerned about is what does the plant look like underground? Because we know that if a plant has a better root system, they have the better ability to withstand drought and disease. So most plants get more stressed in the summertime, because in the springtime we're all happy to go gardening, we fertilize religiously, but in the summer we sort of forget to water and fertilize and so forth. And some of the things that actually happen is plants get to a point where they physically cannot take up any more nutrients. And so their biological system doesn't allow the nutrients to be taken up. The EC in your water, or pH in your water or soil changes, plus the fertilizer. And so you've got all these things going on. And so what they need is a buffering agent. And so that's why farmers will put limestone out and they'll neutralize that soil. Well, our fertilizers both have a neutralizing agent. It's iron, it's chelated iron, it's EDDHA. It's a very specific, and it's an expensive ingredient that you cannot find in any other fertilizer. And that's why our slow release, or our continuous release, is not blue, it's sort of a red color. We remind people that there's iron in that product. So that lowers that level, allowing those plants to bring in those nutrients. So this is a great product, water soluble. And what I recommend to gardeners is, if you can, is fertilize every third watering. So people ask, how often should I fertilize? Well, it depends. If you're watering one time a week in the springtime, you know, 3 times a week or 3 times a month in April is perfectly fine. But if you're watering 3 times a day,
In the summer, right?
in the summer, you're leaching out all those nutrients every time you water without fertilizer. So that's where I say every third watering. So in the springtime, I might feed just once a month. My plants are a lot smaller. They probably have a lot of fertilizer from the grower or the retailer initially, and the soil has got a charge in it oftentimes. But by the time the summer comes and you're watering and it's raining more and more and so forth, things are being leached out. So I do feed every third watering. So in the summer, the plants might get fed twice a week. In the spring, they might get fed once a month. So that's just a good rule of thumb. Now, we do sell a continuous release fertilizer, and you know, some of you might be familiar with Osmocote, and that's another product that, you know, Miracle-Gro might sell. And that's another product, but Osmocote doesn't have the chelated iron in it. It's a buffering. And what the Osmocote is, we've all seen the Aflac commercials of the duck walking around, right?
Yeah.
It's supplemental insurance. You already have insurance,
right,
but this is supplemental insurance. And that's what I say a continuous release is really a supplemental fertilizer, where you're using a water soluble, it doesn't take the place. But we know that oftentimes in the summer months, our plants are hungrier, they don't get fed as often, as much as we would like, and a controlled release fertilizer is released by heat. So it's there in the springtime, but it's not being used. So as that plant gets more stressed, as the temperatures rise, the plant can then get this heat-activated fertilizer that is chelated, does have chelated iron in it. So again, when the plant can't take up nutrients, it's got that buffering agent that allows those nutrients to be taken up. And so what I do with this is I top dress, put it around the base of my plants when I plant them, but before I do that, I actually mix it in with my soil. So even if your soil has a starter charge, it's a very low starter charge, and because it's not heat activated with those, that will be used up early in the spring. Okay. This comes in on your summer. It's that supplemental duck walking around. That's your supplemental insurance, and that will perform all the way into the summer and fall months, long after you've been fertilizing. And so those just keep. And what fertilizer does is it really causes more branching. And so when you have a better root system, you have tighter internodes, the distance between each of the leaflets. So when your plants get stretched or they're flowering on the end, that's because they're reaching for nutrients or they think their life is over. And so when you have a plant that's dark leafed and the leaves are very close, every single node is close, that's because they're getting well fed. And that will also create more branches and more opportunities to create flowers. So feeding is something that we heavily recommend if you want to have more flowers and if you want your plants to withstand any diseases. And when we're healthy taking vitamins,
right,
we're going to be less susceptible to what the world throws at us, and plants are no different.
Okay, and then we have your aqua pots. Now I don't have any of these, but I hope to get at least one or two this year. So talk a little bit about aqua pots.
Yeah, so again, water savings is a huge thing. There's water restrictions, there's the amount of time that people water. And usually when people are planting in containers, a lot of people are using soil over and over, which is a no-no. It's like putting an old Band-Aid on a new cut. I mean, you're planting a brand new plant in that container with old soil. And introducing, I just told you, our plants have no viruses or diseases or whatever, and now you're putting it into soil that's from last year. What bugs and viruses and diseases might you have in that soil? And so starting with new soil is great. But a lot of people will put packing peanuts under a large container like this. And so they'll fill it halfway up because they don't want to waste all their money in soils.
That's correct.
Right?
Okay.
So they'll put packing peanuts or they'll buy those crazy upsy-daisy things that will put half the container at an empty void, essentially. So my friend, Jack Barnwell, developed a system that basically, here's your upsy-daisy. It's a platform that blocks off that bottom of that container. And that was our original design with aqua pots, with the container actually being the water reservoir. Well, then, you had to have a hole on the side of the container because you're draining out up here. And we said, why don't we create the water reservoir right here? So what happens is you put this in a container and our aqua pot's light. This fits it automatically. But if you have your own container that's at least 14 inches across at 8 inches up, this will drop right in. And you fill it up with water, you pack your soil in here, you plant your soil up to here, and then your water will drain out each of these 8 drainage holes out of the bottom of your regular container. So now just think about having an insert that's got almost 3 gallons of water. So now your plants have access to water all the time, whether they're getting watered or not. When it rains, guess where the water goes? It trickles down and is stored in here. You don't have the runoff. And then also with fertilizer, every time you fertilize and then water, clear water, you're washing all those nutrients out. Well, here they're staying in the container. So now you have water infused fertilizer water that your plants are that much healthier. And so these just drop right in, and you can pull that up to adjust the height. In the future, we're going to have a little indicator of how high your water is. But what I do is take a wooden dowel, stick it in there, just like a dipstick, and you'll see how much water you have, and you'll see over time, hey, this container is planted on the front porch, I get full sun, I need to do it once a week, fill it up once a week. My ones in the back are in the shade, maybe once every 2 weeks. So depending on your temperatures and your heat and the type of plants, if you have really vigorous, grasses or supertunias in here, you're gonna probably require more water than some other plants. So people will say, well, how many times do I have to water? Well, some areas you do it once a week, other areas you're still doing it twice, but you're not doing it 7 times a week. And so we've got them in various color, sizes, big urns and things like that. But it's, again, a great use of water, and you can put this in, a lot of people have their favorite containers, so you can do that. And if you have a square container, we do have a square adapter that fits our square containers perfectly, but I would recommend, if you have a square container, go with a round insert, because even if the soil is on the outside of that will still provide more soil for a big plant like that, and eventually the roots will go there as the water goes there eventually and spills out and drains off, and so then you can do that. So people have been buying, and the square insert goes too high in their container and they only have 3 inches to plant. And I'm like, get rid of the square insert, allow all that soil to go down, and let this sit in the bottom. So we're super excited. These are brand new. Garden centers will have them a little bit starting this coming year. They'll be hard to find this first year, as it took us a little while to get this line out the door. But this is a fantastic breakthrough, and they're lightweight. So,
Yes.
so we had a ceramic one. So this looks like it's concrete. This is actually made in the Philippines. It's actually rolled in volcanic ash from the Philippines. But if this was concrete, you couldn't lift it, you couldn't move it, and then you don't also have to worry about them freezing in the winter as well. They won't crack, and you don't have to drain them. So even if you have extra water in here, if it fills up or thaws, a lot of times our winters are milder these days.
Right.
So they're still going to fill up with water through the fall and the winter months. People think they don't get rain. Well, they get snow, and it melts. And when it overflows, it's not going to crack that container or that insert, because it will flow out the bottom. And so they're just a really, really great addition to our line.
And you also have a new product line called Leaf Joy, and that's your house plants.
Yeah.
You want to talk a little bit about that? I do have a couple, but I want to definitely get some more.
Yeah, so houseplants have become hugely popular, right? And they're popular with younger folks, and probably a lot of the same plants you bought 20 or 30 years ago are now becoming stylish again.
They are.
Calatheas and other things. And so, again, what we wanted to do with our houseplant line is, majority of houseplants are grown outside in Florida. And most people were told that you don't need to fertilize your houseplants. And that was true when they're being produced in Florida, where their temperatures are hot. So you think about a northern garden center or a Midwest garden center, typically those plants are coming from a very warm area, and most tropical plants, they don't grow much after 78 degrees. They sort of go dormant. Mm-hmm. So if you're bringing a plant from Florida that's gone into dormancy, yeah, you don't want to feed it. But we want plants that are actively growing. You want to see that you're successful as a gardener. You want to see that new leaf come up. That means that you've got it in the right spot and the plant is healthy, and we don't name our plants, do we? Yeah, house plants, we name them, right? And
Yes.
so you don't want Sally to die in the corner. You want Sally to look happy, and you know that Sally's happy because she's produced a new leaf. And that you don't oftentimes see with plants that have been going into the dormancy. So it might take a year for that plant to come out of dormancy, get used to it being in your house, and that's where people say, you don't have to transplant, wait for it to get settled in. Well, an actively growing plant is a little bit different. So what we have done is we've partnered with a company who's growing all of our houseplants indoors. And so they've never been outside. They're growing in an environment where they're actually recycling the heat and the carbon dioxide to re-put, and they're piping that back into the plant so that they're reusing that in photosynthesis. So one of the things of those plants being grown indoors all the time just allows for a virus-free plant. Something that's actively growing doesn't go into hibernation unless you bring it inside and let it go into hibernation. My plants hibernate at 58 degrees at night in my house, so we run the temperatures really low. But most people don't do that, and they keep a great environment. But one of the key things, a couple of the key things that we did with the houseplant line is we knew that people struggled on where to put the plants. So when you're buying a plant, whether it's indoor or outdoor, you're thinking about where you're going to put it. It's going to be on my front patio. It's going to be in my window box. It's going to be in my backyard, sun or shade or whatever. And the same thing happens with your houseplants. But people didn't get the information on the tag. It just said foliage plant, or it's a pothos or a calathea, and you're like, well, I don't know what is this plant like? So we did some research, and then Dave Kinsera on our sales side said, why don't we divide these into uses? So if you got a hot, humid area, like a bathroom or a kitchen, it's our spa collection. So here are plants that work well in those high humidity. If you've got a dark space, an office space or a basement space or a closet area, we all have those dark spots in our houses, so that's the cocoon collection. If you've got an area with bright lights, atrium and so forth, and so we really categorize these plants based on the light levels that they would require, and humidity levels, so that people could be more successful with their plants. And then secondly, we created tags. Most plants didn't have large tags, and so these have amazing information on them. And then most of our containers, if people are buying, our pots are made with a water reservoir either in them, if it's ceramic, or in our Rush series, there's actually a plastic bag, so they're great for gift giving. They don't run all over your floor. And then probably, one of the things that has been really encouraging for people is they want a house plant, but just as you wanted, plants that, new gardeners can't kill, we have a line of our H2O leaf joy series, and that's basically a vessel that contains water. The plants have been grown in that environment. You just can't take a plant and stick it in a water environment. You can't take a frog and throw it in a pond and it's never been in the water before, right? And same with plants. So we grow these in a hydroponics type of situation. And then those plants, you don't even have to water them. And you can put them in a sunny spot, a shady spot, whatever the case may be. And they have the right amount of nutrients in that water, which is like basically zero. And so that's great for dorm rooms, on desks, or offices, or bathrooms, or places that you don't tend to bring a watering can. And those are great plants. And so we have a number of different designs of vessels that hold water, and so those have been really popular.
I do have one in my office, and I had it from the Grand Garden Show. Have not given it any water, and it's still alive in the vessel.
And that was a year ago.
Yes, that was over a year ago.
Yeah, and so we have one that has a cork, and people want to pull the cork out. No. The plant doesn't need it. If you pull the cork out, the plant's going to grow out the top, and so it's like a goldfish. It will only get the size that you need to take up that space, but those bowls are great. If you do get any algae because of hot temperatures or anything, or the roots, just rinse it off. Change out the water, but usually that's not an issue at all, and they can go for months, or in your case, a year. So
a year, and it looks exactly the same as I had it last year. So
yeah,
great. Yeah. Now the next question is, native gardens are very popular these days. I have a part of my garden that are for natives. Has Proven Winners ever considered having a native product line?
So we are always looking at what people are interested in, and whether it's pollinators or natives or whatever. And so most native plants don't tend to be very pretty in the garden.
No.
And unfortunately, they don't look very good at retail. And in order to get into a grower or a gardener's hand, most often the plant has to look pretty. And so if it doesn't look pretty at retail, that's a real struggle. So that's a big strike against a lot of natives. And so what we've done is work with a lot of native plants and taken the native attributes that people are looking for and supporting, and bred them. Just like whether it's an heirloom tomato, you want that flavor, but you want it in a plant that produces a lot of fruit that's disease-free. Otherwise you get 5 tomatoes and half of them have a disease or a black bottom or something. Right. And so what we're trying to do is to take the best of both worlds and develop nativars. So we're using native plants to breed with North American plants, and breeding those with other plants that have those disease resistance or those growth habits or the flowering performance or the colors that consumers are looking for. And so they may not be straight natives, but they have native blood, which helps them. And so there are some native plants that we have, phloxes and others, but they just tend to be very difficult in many different areas to work well around the nation. And so a native plant in Texas isn't going to work in Michigan. Mm-hmm. Right? And so that's the thing, is when you're buying, is it native to your area or is it just native to North America? And that's what people don't think about. Oh, I want to buy native plants. Well, where is it native to? And if it's native to the whole USA, well, that's probably not true.
No, it's no.
You know, and so if you're only looking for native Wisconsin plants, that's a very small plant group. And so what we're trying to do is take those native attributes that make that plant do well in that area and breed it with a stronger plant or a better looking plant in the long run that has still the attractors to pollinators, is still responsible, still oftentimes a sterile variety. A lot of native plants become invasive in areas. So it can be a native in Illinois, but that honeysuckle down in the south is going to be hugely, you know, a problem, or even up north. And lantanas are the same thing. You know, you have lantanas that throw a lot of seed and they look great in Florida, but then everybody has them. And they don't want that, you know. And up north, sterility of a lantana isn't that important unless you don't want birds to create, you know, or have all the berries all along and staining your patio. So you may not have that plant even because the frost is going to kill it.
Right.
But in Florida, you're going to have seeds all over the place, and so those are things that we look at to be responsible in the marketplace. And so, are we looking to develop an entire line of native plants? Probably not.
Okay.
Are there plants that are native in our line? Yes. Are we breeding with native plants to make our plants even better? Yes.
In the next question, I see a lot of people, some proven winners plants are difficult to find in some areas, like I've heard California and Texas. Can you explain why that is?
Yeah, well, a lot of it is just the marketplace. There are 10 times more garden centers in the Northeast and Midwest than there are outside of those areas, so in the warmer states. So the warmer areas tend to be dominated by a lot of box stores, so there's fewer independent garden centers. And so if you look at a lot of Proven Winners customers, our customers are east of the Mississippi, north of that Mason-Dixon line. So there's a lot more gardeners and a lot more garden centers in that area. And so when you have fewer independent garden centers in those other areas, the sales just aren't there. And the box stores tend to have a shorter, more condensed group of plants. They might have 5 varieties of Supertunias, but an independent garden center might have 20 varieties. So they might have the national plants of the years and things, so but they may not have, you know, a Super Bells, one of an obscure color that happens to be your favorite that you can get at the local garden center, but you may not find that in other areas. And so our growers, we have customers all over the nation for sure, but our plants are trialed in those warm areas, but it's mainly due to how the retail customer is. There's just fewer garden centers in those areas, and that's really why we brought on our online sales. Is, you know, their prices are ridiculous online, I get it, but we're buying from a local retailer and selling that product, and we only want to sell that product if you can't find it locally. So if you've got to have that, we get it, we're an outlet for that. But encouraging a garden center, hey, I might buy 20 of these, and let that garden center know so that they can be prepared ahead of time. But, you know, when you're buying, the garden center might have to buy 100 plants, and you only want 5 of them. And now they got to find a home for 95 others. And that's a big task to ask of something that they may not feel comfortable of having that variety. And so as our line continues to grow, we recognize that they can't carry you know, just as makeup, they can't carry every single color.
Right.
And garden centers have to balance their risk of how much they can offer. And so we know it can be a challenge to find some things, but that's where we have our national plans and, you know, things that we let our garden centers know a year in advance. Or our gardener's idea book, we actually let our garden centers know what varieties are going to be in there. Or here is Laura at Garden Answers list of plants.
If you've watched Laura, I'm sure you have.
Yeah, and so you get a list of those plants ahead of time so those garden centers can be prepared. But again, online is the fallback position. Every variety is available on the website.
And sometimes if you go to the garden centers, you may just want to ask. You know, there's a possibility if you talk to them, because I work at a garden center, they may get it for you.
Yeah.
So all you can do is ask, or get it online.
Yep.
The final question for us, is there anything new on the horizon for Proven Winners and the products? And I know you were going to talk about the eco pots.
Yeah, so one of the big things that is hitting all industries is single-use plastics, right? And so whether it's a water bottle, so you see a lot of people at parks. I just got back from a camping trip, and even at hotels, they have water machines now that you're filling your own water bottles and things like that. So single-use plastic and our containers for planting and growing it has been a single use. Most recycling companies, even though it's a 5 and it's recycled plastic, because not everybody in the industry uses the same substrates, they're thrown away. And they don't go into the recycling stream. Only, milk jugs and, soap detergent things and water bottles where the industry has said, hey, here's the substrate, everybody uses the same stuff, and that's going to be recycled more frequently. But a container, a plant container, is made by so many different companies with so many different substrates that a recycler doesn't know what to do, and most people don't wash out their pots. And so the recycler doesn't want all that debris. I was actually at a pot manufacturer 2 weeks ago, and they're sorting all of this stuff, and they're washing all the debris, and
Wow.
it's time consuming, and it's costly, and so as we're trying to eliminate single use, we partnered with a company up in Minnesota and developed what we call our Eco Grande. And so this is same size as our regular Grande pot. And again, the Grande came from, the whole notion is most females' hands are maybe 10 to 13% smaller. So you feel more comfortable grabbing something that's thinner. Just as a mug, you don't want to grab a mug, that's why they have handles. Well, most containers were too big, and so we wanted something that was a little taller and narrow, and Grande, everybody likes a Grande coffee, so that's the name of our container. And so, one of the things with our Eco Grande is it had to look and perform better than a plastic container. So a plastic container, people pick up plants all the time. At retail, at the grower, they get moved, they get damaged, and a lot of the eco-type containers, they looked ugly. By the time they got to retail, or they broke off and so forth. So this looks like a plastic container, but what we had to do is develop a new mechanism that people would see, oh, that's a little bit different. So these tabs actually break off, and you can break all these tabs off, exposing the roots to that, and so you can plant this, or I tend to not even plant this. I just put it in my compost, or if you don't have a compost, you can throw it away and know that you put no oil or plastic into the landfill. What will take, the number one question is, how long will it take to break down? And I say 100,000 years faster than that plastic one you're using. So who cares how long? It will break down. That's the important thing, that there's no plastic in it. So who cares how long? Now if you're planting this in containers, at the end of the season, you plant them in April or May, you're going to unplant them in October or November. 5 months is not going to break this container down. And so you're going to have the container left. If you have it in a landscape, probably a couple years. But again, you only have it in 5 months because up north, it's going to be cold in October. These aren't going to break down all winter long. There's nothing happening. There's no heat. There's no air or whatever. No water. And so realistically, it's going to take a couple years for it to break down in the garden. What will probably be left is more of the rim, which is why we've developed a new rim that's less rigid. It still has to hold up for our growers and our retailers, and for consumers, they don't break off that piece, because as soon as you break it off, consumers don't buy it. And so there's a lot of things that have to happen with these containers. And so this is our newest quart program. And you'll see on the quart, instead of having 4 different tabs, we've gone to a 2-tab system. So now you actually break off 2 tabs, and now this much is available. And so that's even easier on a Grande than having 4. And so this is really nice, particularly on perennials and other things where your roots might be wound around. You're not disturbing them as much. You can plant this right in for a perennial, plant it right in the ground. Again, I tend to compost these or grind these up or throw them away. But you can just know that there is 0 plastic. No one had to drill for this. It wasn't a fossil fuel for getting here. All the product is made in Minnesota. and it's made from corn or beet starch or other types of starches that are plant available. And again, people will ask, well, are you taking away from food for animals or from people? No, this is not made from the byproducts. It's made from the roots and stalks of various plants that are made. And that's why you actually have some micronutrients in here as well. So it doesn't affect the grower at all or the retailer. They can still water and fertilize it as needed. But you do have those nutrients, they're micronutrients that are built in that, again, provide an additional benefit when planted in the ground. So long term, these are super great. The label and the printing is also cornstarch based or PLA type of material that is certified. So we just got BPI certification, and then obviously USDA certified as well. So a lot of great things, and one of the newest thing is if you're going to sell an Eco Grande container and an Eco pot, how are you going to sell with a plastic tag? So I actually have prototypes that no one has actually ever seen before, various prototypes. And so these are all different substrates. So you can see these are all 3 different types of substrates. They feel like plastic, they bend like plastic, they have a gloss cover, but they have secret codes on the back of which ones are the best. And so they have to stand up to printing, they have to stand up to sticking in our tag lots and not breaking. They have to not be brittle when exposed to the sun. So we are testing these, and so next spring will be the first time that a small subset, maybe a couple 100,000 of these tags will be in the marketplace. And so then you can have a plant tag, and people will say, well, how long is it going to break down? Well, it's not going to break down in the season. So if you need to know what variety you planted at the end of the season, your tag will still be available. But buy 2 plants and stick one in a drawer and put it in your baggie, and then or use our idea boards online and just list all the plants, because our idea boards is like a Pinterest board right on our website.
Yes.
And then you don't have to save your tags. You don't have to remember where you planted. You can create as many boards as you want. Front door, back door, container garden, window box. You just create as many boards as you want and name them however you want. And then every year you can look at that and say, hey, what did I plant in 2022? What did I plant in 23? So you don't have to save your tags. So even if they break down, you know exactly what you planted every single year.
I use the idea boards every year because I change my color theme and the type of plants. So great.
Yeah, so that's the newest thing, and that'll be coming. And we're just going to continue to develop more products, whether it's organic fertilizers or other types of things in single-use plastic. We just know that the consumer is concerned about, as are we. So we're constantly working on initiatives. In fact, this building that we're staying in is 100% of the electricity is being solar powered.
Oh, wow.
We have 372 solar panels on this roof. This is an old Farm and Fleet store, and we converted it all to an eco-friendly building and an environment that our employees can be proud that we're not drilling for oil to heat and cool this place. So
great. Well, I just wanted to thank you so much for spending time with us today out of your busy schedule. So thank you very much.
Yeah.
And go buy some Proven Winners. They're a great product. Let's go on a little Proven Winners tour now. This room housed all of their hardscapes, water-wise drip system, twist and plant augers, your fertilizers, and aquapots. Now we're going back in the warehouse area where they do all their packing. So you can see the boxes here for packing. And there's some more aquapots and fertilizers. So here we have the Proven Winners seeds that they sell online. Also, they have extra supplies back here, some timers, fertilizers, water-wise drip systems. Here's all the extra parts that you can order for your drip system. And of course, the Gardener's Idea book. Here we have the break room, so we have some games that they can play. This is where they have a television, and it looks like a kitchen. And here are the steps that a Proven Winners plant takes to get from the breeding program all the way to the customer. These are Proven Winners office spaces. And when I was there was not a lot of people. They were on vacation. So I hope you enjoyed this tour through Proven Winners. Make sure you try out their products. They are great plants and a great company. I hope you enjoyed my interview with Marshall and going on a little tour of the facility. So make sure you like and comment below if your garden centers carry Proven Winners, and if they do, what are your favorite plants? If you live in the southwest suburbs, the garden center that I work at, Jim Melka Landscape and Garden Center, does sell the Proven Winners products. So make sure you come in the spring to check them out. Next week, I'm going to be storing my dahlias, my gladiolas, and my lilies. So make sure you're subscribed and hit the notification bell for any future videos. Now I want to share that beautiful garden quote from an unknown author. Thanks for watching and happy gardening. Bye-bye.